What do you get when you cross a dyslexic, an insomniac, and an agnostic?
What?
Someone who lies awake at night wondering if there is a dog. I'm Rodney Clapp, and I am an editor with Cascade Books. I have found that working throughout my career as an author and an editor has been very simpatico. The two have fit together very well. I've always been an editor in part because I've never been an author whose writing could support my livelihood. My writing has done all right, but it certainly wouldn't take care of my family's livelihood, and so I've needed other sorts of work to help do that, and editorial work has been that. And I find that you're doing very similar things as an editor and as an author. You're choosing words. You're trying to craft words. You're trying to tell the most effective story. You're coming alongside yourself as an author and alongside another person as an editor to do the best possible job at that. So I've found the two things very closely related, and I haven't found them in tension at all, and I think in many ways that as I become hopefully a better editor, I become a better writer, and likewise as I become a better writer, that I become a better editor. I like projects that are fresh. I like projects that are doing something relatively new and are pointing in some new directions. I like projects that are well written. I really enjoy a project that is sculpted and crafted carefully and effectively and is clear and maybe has some good metaphors and similes going for it. Those are the kinds of projects that I like working on, and I'd say beyond that, I'd like working on a variety of projects. So I'm happy at Wipf that we have such a variety of books that we do. And that really enables me to work with quite a range of projects. I like working with thoughtful authors. I like working with serious authors, and I don't mean by that authors without a sense of humor. I love authors who have a sense of humor. But by a serious author, I mean an author who really cares about what he or she is doing and is willing to work hard on it and has put a lot of effort into it. At the research stage, at the expression stage, and throughout the working on the project. So that's the kind of author I most appreciate, is the serious and dedicated author. The books that I have written have had to do with church and culture, and definitely different aspects of the understanding of church and culture. Like one of my main books, People, A Peculiar People, is a book about the church as itself, a kind of culture, a particular group or community of people that speaks a specific language and lives by a particular calendar, and so on and so forth, and in that regard is a kind of culture. So I've written about the church as itself a culture, and then I've written about the interaction of the church with other cultures, not least popular culture. So one of my books deals with Johnny Cash and the Great American Contradiction, and deals with Christianity and Johnny Cash and his music and the understanding of America and American culture flowing out of that and being developed with that. And others of my books have had to do again with aspects of church as itself a kind of culture, and particularly in Families at the Crossroads, is a book where I talked about the church and its culture of marriage and family and singleness. So those have been the subjects that have empowered and really lain under my books and their approaches. A big concern in writing about the church is that it escaped cultural captivity, and of course, in the American setting, that's captivity to an American identity and trying to get along and think of America as a Christian country, and then misidentify the church as being about supporting America as a Christian country. And I think that's a fundamental category mistake. The church is itself a distinctive culture, and is the distinctive Christian culture in the world, and is not about supporting America or Germany or Australia or any other country in being a quote-unquote Christian country. There's definitely a sense in which my books are critical of America, and particularly this confusion of American with church identity. I think that's just a flat-out mistake and should be altogether avoided. On the other hand, it wouldn't be fair to say that I dismiss America or totally or simply hate America. I am an American. There's a lot of things about America that I innately love. I love the landscape of America and the mountains and the streams and the oceans and so on and so forth. And I love American popular culture, particularly, not least, Black American popular culture and music and so forth, and what it brings to play in the world and the richness that I think that it adds to things. So I think that the important thing is not confusing America with the church, but that doesn't mean that good things in the way of God cannot come out of America. And in fact, I think there's a way in which we can be properly patriotic even in America, and that patriotism has to do with being analogous to our commitment to our mother or our father, where I say my mother is the best mother in the world. That doesn't genuinely or really mean that I'm speaking to another person and saying my mother is better than your mother, or your mother can't be the best mother in the world to you. I think patriotism is analogous to that. There's a sense in which our country is something that we belong to, and that we can have an allegiance to, but without pretending that it is first and foremost and finally the greatest thing in the world and the only true country on earth. Johnny Cash is a primary musician who captures these elements of tension and contradiction in the American identity, such as elements of the embrace of tradition and also of progress, and also the old and the new, and violence and peace and so forth. Johnny Cash embraced all these different traditions, and in that way, I think is ultimately ultimately American musician. But other musicians who capture part of that, I think Johnny Cash is supreme in that sense. But I think of Elvis Presley, who again was a person who, like Johnny Cash, had deep Christian roots and tried to live in some faithfulness to that, but fell away from those roots in some ways, and also struggled with newness and tradition, and with some of those same elements. So I'd say Elvis is a second musician with those characteristics. A very influential mentor for me was Robert Webber. I did a graduate degree at Wheaton College, and Bob was teaching there at the time. And he was someone who really introduced me to small O orthodoxy and the church fathers and the sacramental vision of the faith and the more liturgical expression of the Christian faith. And so that was very important to me, and as a big part of my Christian life. I've been an Episcopalian for about 30 years, and Bob was a real player in making me want to become an Episcopalian. So his book, like Common Roots, was called one of his early books, was the title of one of his early books, and it had a huge influence on me. And I'd be remiss, too, if I didn't mention the books of Stanley Hauerwas, who've had a huge influence on my own writing and thinking. and all of Stanley's books. I discovered his books when I was taking a course at a seminary in Wisconsin, and I just bought every book that was then available. That was in the mid-'80s, and have since read most all of his books, although it's not necessarily easy to keep up with every one of his books. But I read, was and very much influenced by his Anabaptist ethics and his take on John Howard Yoder.